Howdy there, partner. This is an interview I had the opportunity of recording with Lyra, the creator of the short film Radar. I recommend that you check it out if you're interested in storytelling. It has excellent writing, and I think it deserves way more praise than it's gotten. I'll probably put a link to Radar in the description. I also made a video talking about Radar. Yeah, this is more of a podcast style thing, so I would recommend having it on in the background. Take care of yourself, okay? I have the creator of Radar here with me, Lyra. Say hello.
Hello. Nice to see you all.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing quite well. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm quite grateful for this opportunity.
Oh, the honor is all mine, trust me. Why did you choose the title Radar?
Two big reasons. A, it's a palindrome, which worked nicely for conveying the idea of this loop that Nathan has found himself in. But B, the film gets more and more red as Nathan progresses closer to the revelation at the end. At which point the film takes on more earthy tones and blues and stuff like that. So in the sense, the whole film is a radar using color intensity to denote proximity to this horrific truth.
Oh yeah, I can see that. That is some serious thought that went into that.
Thank you.
What inspired you to create Radar?
A lot of people have asked this question, and usually I would give the answer of Silent Hill 2, Jacob's Ladder, and all of the actual media that sort of inspired me to create the film. But I think it'd be interesting in this interview to talk about things from a more interpersonal sense, the driving force that kind of motivated me to write a story like this. If we're speaking in that sense, the main catalyst for creating Radar was the fear of growing up, as well as my very strained relationships with my closest friends and family at the time. I think as I was studying Radar, that was the worst period of my life. I was at the threshold of adulthood where life is telling you straighten your priorities, grow from your trauma in order to move forward, but I couldn't really find the strength within myself to. And in that sense, I think Radar is about moving on from trauma and learning to appreciate life for even a fleeting moment, because you never really know how long left you're going to have to appreciate what you have. Even if I don't think I've managed to settle into the role of a functioning adult yet, I think the film is a constant reminder that such a future is possible and that I shouldn't waste time doubting myself or beating myself up for my small losses,
Yeah, I'm very familiar with what you're talking about. You're at that age where you have that pressure, okay, I need to be at this point now.
And you never quite feel like you've made it.
Right.
You always feel like you're a little behind everybody else.
Yeah, there's kind of that imposter syndrome.
I feel like that about everything, even art. I feel like that as an artist, as a filmmaker, as a friend a lot as well. Just that nagging imposter syndrome. You didn't get here like everybody else, and so you're not worthy of what you have.
Do you have the feeling of clearly I've pulled some strings here, clearly I've manipulated something, I don't deserve...
Every day, every single day, and it kills me, but friends remind me that I've still worked very hard, and I have to take their words and just try to see them as the truth, but I'll admit that it can be very, very hard too.
I understand that, and I think a lot of people are familiar with that feeling. You're definitely not alone.
Well, it's comforting to have company in this sinking little ship I call my life.
Yeah. How long did production take, and what was the most challenging part of production?
Production took about 6 months, if I remember correctly, most of which was spent alone in my room because of the very personal nature of the project, but also because I'll admit that when I started it, due to the kind of sink or swim nature of my life at that point, I was very self-centered, and I wanted this to seem like a big personal victory. All of the time I was spending on this artistically wasn't for nothing. I did this. And I think over the course of the film, I was taught a level of tenderness and how to reach out to others that I hadn't really had before. And I still regret how I stupidly imposed that isolation on myself. Because it was really demotivating and demoralizing to be the only one involved with the project at the time. And that definitely showed in the quality of work I was putting out during the first 2/3 of production.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, though, my disposition softened a bit, and I was able to reach out and finally ask for help with a newly formed studio, Yurei. Yurei had existed before. It was a game development studio. Our first project was canceled, and I'll admit I was a horrible director at the time. I think the studio was rebirthed in a similar timeline to myself during the production process. So in that way, I think the story of making Radar kind of mirrored the story of the film, because, you know, Nathan's super closed off at first, and I think he only finds the strength to move on once he's remembered, you know, community and his support system and everything like that. As far as our biggest challenge during production, I think it was getting the eyeball hallway to look right. It was this like big detailed scene with a lot of moving parts. Things would glitch out, lights wouldn't look quite right. The eyes would look tacky sometimes because the lighting on them would look super flat. Because, you know, when you're animating a scene and you choose that like flashlight, like, you know, like spotlight lighting, oh my god, it is the death of good looking environments, because such a flat and bright lighting setup can only make everything around it look flat, just because of how like strong the light hitting it is. So it was like a constant tug of war trying to find out what like looked best for the final film. Looking back though, I think we managed pretty well. I mean, all things considered.
Yeah, I think the hallway is the strongest scene of the entire film. In production, did the face have a working name, or was it always just the face?
So from the moment the character was created, like from the moment I'd done my very first piece of concept art, I'd settled on the name Face. I think that at one point I considered giving it a proper name, but I'd already fallen in love with the ambiguity of Face by that time. A big reason I gravitated instantly towards it was because there's a character, like a similar character of the same name in Godzilla NES, which, shout out to anybody who's read or listened to that story, it's one of my favorites. I won't spoil anything super much, but there's, at one point, you know, he's going through the game and there ends up being these, quiz levels that pop up, where you basically go in and there's this little, like, smiley face in the middle of the screen with a question under it, and you pick yes or no, and it'll react by changing its expression. But that character's name is just Face, and so I think I'd like to think of it as like a loving reference to that character.
In the scene with Nathan giving the face the silent treatment, what was the face showing Nathan that made him vomit?
Something that Nathan had already seen before, but didn't want to remember. I can tell you that much, but not much more.
Okay. In the no hand scene, quote unquote, through the window, I noticed that there seems to be like an interior of another room. What is going on with that?
You're actually the first person to ever like independently notice that. So first of all, congratulations, because it's way too fuzzy for most people to make out. That room on the other side is just like another sort of replica of Nathan's bedroom. I won't explain that choice from a production standpoint, as I believe going too far into it could very seriously spoil like the mechanics behind how Radar works. Okay. You'll definitely find out what that was in due time, though, I think.
Why did you choose the microbes or amoebas as the background for the scene after the hand scene?
I really felt it best described how Nathan was feeling in the moment. The distorted, writhing microorganisms are unsettling in the way that you feel as if like something's crawling around under your skin. You feel like the urge to itch it, you know. There were, of course, other motivators for this choice, but unfortunately I can't personally speak on them.
The scene at the door, who were the floating shadows?
I can give you a hint if you want it.
Okay.
The only hint that I can give is, why are there so many of them? Because it looks like there's like a bajillion there just like sitting in the sky. Other than that, all I can say is wait for our next project.
Okay. Oh shit. This next project is really hyping up. I'm really excited about it. What do you hope the viewer takes away from watching Radar?
This is a really, really good question. Oh my gosh. I think one of the big takeaways in a more broad sense is just, dude, go make that thing you've been wanting to make. Like, Radar is something I now view as kind of a scrappy effort, just cobbled together from my anxieties and my insecurities. And I have this like odd love-hate relationship with the film now, as all artists tend to have with their work. But even if I feel the film could have been far better, people really enjoyed it, and it inspired them, and it touched them. It was able to help some people get through things, as I've heard. They found something special in it, and I think that should be a lesson to new creators. Like, don't be afraid to put that first project out. Will it be amazing? Probably not, and that's more than okay. In fact, that's what makes it special, I would argue. If you truly love what you're doing and you put passion into it, it'll show. People will enjoy it regardless of its perceived shortcomings.
Damn, I really felt that as somebody who's like recently starting to make stuff. I really feel that. I mean, like,
dude, you're doing great.
You've seen the No Through Road video, right? Like, that was not that was not my best work. Are there any secrets in Radar that we missed that you can give us a hint to?
Ooh. When Nathan is like whipping around in his driveway, like right before the field scene, like, he turns around and then he's like, oh no, and he like turns back around and there's the field. In that like final turn, pause right before he does it and like go frame by frame as he's turning, because there's something cool you may see.
Now we're going to move into the general analog horror questions. First, is there any trend or other feature of analog horror that you're not personally a fan of?
I think Urban Spook sets a really dangerous precedent for the future of analog horror.
Don't get me started.
It's this series built on the idea of like pushing the extremes in terms of obscenity without providing a story of substance. And I fear that younger creators will see this series. It'll inspire them to create something that pushes the envelope even further without regard for the reality of the sensitive situations and subjects depicted. That these further iterations on the genre in his wake will hold even less substance than the painter did. But I would never usually like single out a creator like that, but Urban Spook series could have very like dangerous side effects if left unchecked. It's not a matter of whether you like it or not anymore. It's the fact that kids like analog horror, and kids will bypass that safety filter, watch it, and then try to create something far worse without understanding the nuances of what's being depicted and how grave that actually is.
I wholeheartedly agree with that message. Completely agree with that message. What would you advise people to do first when they decide they want to make something?
I would say my general rule of thumb is to take similar pieces of media to like what you're trying to make and dissect them. Figure out what makes them tick, figure out what does and doesn't work for you, like what parts you're not necessarily a fan of, and then like compare it and contrast it to other pieces of media in that same genre. And you can very quickly, through that method, build up this list of fundamentals for whatever you're trying to create.
An outline, I mean,
yeah.
Many people will suffer a sort of slump in the middle of their projects that makes them feel unmotivated to finish it. What would you say to help those people?
I can't give the best words of advice here because it happens to me a lot. But what has personally helped me is just finding other people to collaborate with, other people who are as passionate and who will feed into your motivation. It can be hard, but I don't think Radar would have even existed if it weren't for those who lifted me and matched my passion for the project when it was waning. There was a huge period where I thought I was never going to finish the project and then it was just going to become another one of my scrapped ventures. But then people like Rusty came in and I realized like they did so much work for it. Like, I didn't want it to be in vain, so I kind of pushed along so that their work could be seen.
Right, because now there's even some obligation that goes into it, and like that's kind of a bad word to some people, but it has a function,
It does.
And collaboration is a conversation, and if you kind of keep that conversation going, you know what I mean? If there's more people working towards the same goal, you'll have more people whose energy is still going when yours is failing, and you'll be able to kind of ride their energy too.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better.
What would you like to see more of in the subgenre?
Definitely a lot more otherworldly environments and creative monsters. I mean, I love the more psychological based horror that we've been getting lately, and I really love that people are branching out into these deeper and more touching stories. But I also really love a good monster design. Like, I won't ever turn my head away from a creature feature, and I feel like a lot of analog horror defaults to a more humanoid adversary. And these are all great. The mimics from Vita Carnis are especially like a good standout. But I would also love to see people experiment more with a lot more like crazy stuff that looks very like alien and inhuman, like a lot more like quadrupedal stuff as well, you know?
Yeah.
It would be really fun, I think.
Yeah, there does seem to be some stagnation, and I think a lot of people are getting tired of kind of the mimic doppelganger, you know.
Yeah.
Do you have another project you'd like to tease? And I feel like you've kind of been teasing it.
Right now, the rest of Studio Yurei and I are constructing an extended cut of Radar simply dubbed, at least this is the production name, Radar the Studio Cut. If the original film was a demo reel touching on the capability of the studio, then this film is the fully realized product, the absolute version of the film. Completely reconstructed from the ground up, this project will be the first to use the full extent of Studio Yurei's talents. Where the original only used about a third of the available team members, and only utilized them within like the last 2 to 3 months of production, this is definitely going to be something way bigger. More news on this will be slowly dripped out within the coming months, but for now, just know that you are in for a hell of a ride. We've truly been trying to construct the best, worst nightmare.
That is very, very exciting. I am very hyped for it. It's gonna be awesome, and I will certainly be talking to you again once that comes out.
Yeah.
Sure.
I'm hyped for you to see it. I'm hyped for everybody to see it.
Any last words?
I'd like to emphasize in my closing statements that none of what you've seen on screen and none of what you will see in the future would be remotely possible without the passion, the dedication, and the love of the amazing people who decided to join me under Studio Yurei. Us creators are stronger together, and I am incredibly happy to have so many creatives call our group home. That people feel safe to experiment and pitch their wild ideas. I feel it's only the beginning for us. And that is such an exciting and scary prospect, but I could never ask to meet that challenge standing alongside better people. I am privileged and honored to call myself a director and a friend to this cast of misfits. Please, when talking about Radar the Studio Cut, and our future endeavors, hold all of them up to the same high degree of praise that you would meet, because they are the unsung heroes that deserve the world. They are the true soul behind these stories.
Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to interview you.
Please, the honor is all mine. As you said earlier, you can have me on any time that you would like.
You have a good night.
You too.